Good afternoon and welcome to the Call to Justice. Welcome back. It's so good to see everyone for episode 4 this week, live from our studios of WBGR, Believing in God Radio, here in Prince George's County, Maryland. I'm your host, Amos Jones, as we stream live to 750,000 subscribers here on the Call to Justice. Welcome to it. Today's program focuses entirely on you, the listening public, the thinking public. You now today may call in as we open our lines. 301-429-9247 is the number. Today's program is one of our Ask Amos Anything days, and the purpose is to provide moral and legal theory to help you through life's way. Not legal advice, that's for your attorney. But I am equipped and positioned as a legal academic, as an ordained Baptist deacon, and as someone who is concerned with justice to help you think through the challenges in your life as they interact with legal moral principles of our communities. Now, I also want you to be aware of the significance on these Ask Amos Anything Saturdays of this robe that I'm wearing. We know the purpose of a robe. A robe is not supposed to be a fashion statement. 3 broad categories of persons wear robes. Academicians wear robes, and this is my academic festival as a function of my Doctor of Laws degree from Harvard, and that's why it's the special authorized robe in color, the crimson, designed and in keeping with an international conference to determine colors and regalia for academic festivals, schools around the world. So I'm wearing my academic robe, but robes also have a dimension in law. You know that judges appear in robes in court proceedings, and you know that clergy in many traditions of Christianity, especially the Catholic Church and mainline Protestant denominations, robing is discreet and modest. Why? These 3 categories of servants wear robes to emphasize that my personality, my preferences, my biases are out the window. I am here to speak from a higher level of ontology, of actuality, of knowledge in the classroom, of equal justice under the laws, as you see our Call to Justice logo here, and also as the way God will be a God of justice. Again, the clergy wear robes to emphasize that they are carrying the word of God, not the word of the clergyman or woman. And so here I sit as your servant, objectively explaining, working through, thinking about, questioning, interrogating, and discussing law and morality. The phone lines are open, 301-429-9247. And what I also want you to feel welcome as you call this week is to stay on the line with me as I engage with you in these questions, and we help to figure out exactly what it is that might answer the deeper questions of your reality, your existence, or maybe even your current just question. I think this is important because as someone who himself has had to hire attorneys or call on experts or speak with clergy persons or speak with academicians, I find that sometimes the worldview of the person giving the information influences and even taints that person's information. Not only in the information given, but the information that's even tapped into. It's said that on the bar exam, that one of the it's true that on the bar exam for attorneys to become licensed to practice law, students traditionally were given for decades a hypothetical fact pattern of things that happened. And so the first problem you had in an essay on the bar exam is to figure out what areas of law are involved in this. In my actual practice, where I do provide legal advice, I often find people have gone to other attorneys who missed a handful of issues that should have been noticed up front. Had the attorney been listening, or had the client provided all the information to the other attorney that I was provided, or in the manner in which the information was provided. So it really helps to liaise with someone who has the same views, values, perspectives, and also somebody with a slightly different approach, but who nevertheless is aware of the supervening objectivity of the work of legal theory, law, and process. After that, there are political considerations, public policy concerns, moral concerns, technical concerns, financial concerns before you decide what you're going to do with the information at your disposal. But the first step is to get the information, and you get that information by sharing. And so here we have an open line for people to call and bring up anything. You can also raise political issues. You can question about things from the previous week in which of shows and programs in which you might not have been able to participate, but you've watched them on our YouTube channel, which you can access through thecalltojustice.tv, www.thecalltojustice.tv. You can link to our YouTube page, but you can call and ask about previous guests' interactions and things. So we do have a caller. You're live on WBGR. Please speak loudly and clearly. You are on the air. What is the question? You're live on WBGR, and your question, you're now on speaker so that you can be heard. Tell us. Well, it seems as though we've lost our caller. We'll try another. The phone lines are open. Call 301-429-9247. You'll recall that we had a number of outstanding guests on the Call to Justice in our first 3 weeks. In week 2, we were very pleased to welcome Georgi Meladze of the Republic of Georgia, who discussed what was happening there with political lockup in the system and judicial retaliation. Maybe you want to ask about that. Well, let's see what this caller is calling about. Good day. You are live on WBGR, the Call to Justice. How can we help you? It's happening again. Okay, now I apologize. Now you're loud and clear. Can you start over, please?
I went to the EEOC and have not heard from them in 18 months while the discrimination on my job has gotten worse. How do I make them work? And thank you for taking my call.
Well, you are welcome. The caller was asking about public administration. She said that she had gone to the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, a federal agency that's tasked with addressing the scourge of employment discrimination, especially as occurring as a result of one's race, sex, religion, things of that nature. The protected class is national origin. And so the question is, it's been 18 months, the caller said. She filed a complaint at the EEOC and hasn't heard anything. You are not alone. And if you went to the EEOC alone, watch out. One of the biggest pitfalls of going to the EEOC is when you go alone and you file the initial questionnaire. So, and that might be what you've done and haven't heard back. Generally, the process is a citizen files an intake questionnaire, sometimes in the mail, sometimes by fax, sometimes online. That questionnaire is then processed, and an intake interview by a specialist at the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission's office nearest you, usually in the largest city or the state, or more than that. Many cities have them in states with many major cities. But you will then go and be interviewed, and then usually the intake officer will draft the charge of discrimination for you on something called EEOC Form 5. They'll usually make it about a paragraph long. If you have an attorney, the attorney is in the process from the beginning with you and will generally do your drafting for you to make sure that you, what we call properly plead, and have a record of the specific acts of discrimination. So you haven't heard from him yet. Well, if you call the EEOC, I'm an attorney, and when I call, I have many cases before the EEOC right now in my practice. You happen to ask about my area of expertise in federal practice, so I know this area well. I've written in the academic area of employment discrimination. Who knows what's happening at the EEOC, but if you try to call them, your chances of getting through are next to none. So you will generally operate by facsimile, or email. There's also an online portal where eventually, once your complaint is in for investigation after the Form 5, a complainant, which is what you are when you file, will be able to upload documents. Then the process can take between 1 and 4 or 5 years. It can be so bad because they can completely destroy you on your job and even fire you, maybe retaliatorily if they know that you filed a complaint. Retaliation is another set of EEOC jurisdiction, often easier to prove than the underlying discrimination, thanks to skeptical judges and skeptical EEOC officers. But if the EEOC, after all their investigation, finds that there is a cause for them to do more, they will. But I would say probably 99,000 times out of 100,000, 99,999 out of 100, they're not going to bring charges. They're going to invite you to go into court at the end of all that and give you 90 days to file a suit yourself and fight for your rights. So the EEOC is a valuable process that puts a production burden on your employer or former employer to explain its defense to your allegations. That's why it's so important that allegations be properly written and carry that way even beyond an intake officer who might, often a non-lawyer intake officer who might try to cut it down too much and defeat your claim unwittingly. So you have raised a very good question that many Americans, including those with attorneys, grapple with. I just want to say something. As our lines are open, you can call while I'm speaking, and I'll let you in queue, and and you can wait for me to finish speaking and acknowledge you. So don't mind calling while I'm speaking. Please, 301-429-9247. 301-429-9247 as our engineer looks to put the number on the screens. But I want you to know that the EEOC is almost a sacred trust, and here's why. The EEOC exists under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 is the principal edifice of the modern civil rights movement led by the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and others. Before there were marches, there was a desire to have a public accommodation law, including employment for employers with 15 or more than 15 employees, and therefore the EEOC was authorized by Congress as part of that Civil Rights Act of 64, which was passed with bipartisan support in a largely white male Congress, almost entirely white male. If the young girls had not been bombed to death in 16th Street Baptist Church in 1963, if the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom had not drawn those hundreds of thousands of demonstrators in 1963, there would not have been the political will to have the Civil Rights Act of 1964. So I take that act very seriously. I'm forever lecturing defense attorneys on the policy. So let's turn to our caller. You're live on WBGR, The Call to Justice. What is your question?
Yes, thank you. What do you think of those law school students who are losing their jobs when they graduate because they were supporting Hamas or seen as anti-Israel? Just wondered what you thought about that, if you could comment.
This is a political question. Thank you, caller. And the question is, you all have heard that in the Israel-Hamas Middle East peace problem that we now have that blew up on October 7th, 3 weeks ago today, we now have American college students and law students in the fray who have taken a position, most famously these folks, on the side of, they would say Palestine. Their critics would say they've taken a side on Hamas's side. The U.S. does not recognize Palestine as a country. Roughly 150 countries in the world actually do recognize Palestine as a country. So it's interesting how you have to have the conversation a particular way based on your understanding of what's a country and what's not. Nevertheless, if it's an Israel-Hamas war, the view is that these students have come out with these statements. Groups of students have signed on. Student organizations have signed on in law schools. Most notably, Rhina Workman, up at New York University School of Law, a very prestigious top 10 law school. She was this Rhina Workman considers Rhina Workman to be transgender, so Rhina Workman requests the pronouns they. Rhina Workman, a black South Carolina native, has taken a position as head of the Student Bar Association at NYU Law, that Israel was entirely responsible. And Professor Alan Dershowitz, whom I respect for his integrity over the years in law and his brilliance in civil libertarian ways, Professor Dershowitz on his podcast, The Der Show, identified Rhina Workman, who signed this statement, and encouraged law firms to look at these students out here and assess whether these are the folks who should be representing particular clientele. The law firm of Winston and Strawn, within 24 hours of that podcast, and I think from pressure other than Professor Dershowitz, Professor Emeritus at Harvard Law School, rescinded the job offer, and so did several others. A big billionaire affiliated with Harvard alumni over a hedge fund raised issues about the 30 student groups at Harvard College that signed on to a similar statement not supporting Israel. The president of Harvard, Claudine Gay, new president, African-American woman, has had to do several statements and speeches to the university about what this divide is. People are being doxxed at Harvard for their position, and now jobs are being rescinded, job offers. So much so that the last report I read said that all 30 of those student groups at Harvard College have backed off and withdrawn from their statement. And so the caller asked me, Amos Jones, host of The Call to Justice, lawyer, journalist, ordained Baptist deacon, ministry that traffics in truth here on WBGR radio. What do I think about the student rescission? Now, I've already done my prayer for peace in episode 1 of The Call to Justice, episode 2, that is. But I want to speak now specifically to the issue here, and that is students whose jobs are withdrawn, internships, because of their political positions and activities. African Americans are accustomed to that because of what happened in the civil rights movement and the vindictive nature of the power structure and the money people. The tradition in the black community has been, you can take your white job and shove it. Naked I came into the world and naked I will leave. That's certainly been my position in all of my activism. They say people are afraid for their position. Well, I'm an evangelical, openly Baptist Protestant. And so I'm concerned about my position too. And that's the position at the pearly gates. So, you can have it. Unfortunately, though, I do believe, as a professor, that the space for students, people who are 18, 19, 20, 21, particularly undergraduates, not in professional school, students should have freedom to make mistakes, if you think it's a mistake, if you assume it's a mistake, even assuming they're completely wrong. There should be a space for students to interact and intellectually experiment very freely. And so I believe that the university space, the student organizing space, should remain open. I was on a panel about a year ago that the Delta Sigma Theta sorority of Fairfax County co-sponsored with several noteworthy education officials and academics. And the purpose was to shed light on what is critical race theory. Is it in our public secondary schools? What are we to make of all of the brouhaha? So I was brought on as a scholar who is concerned with race and who's written widely, and to talk about it. And I, for years, have taken the position since I started out on my legal faculty recruitment back in 2009 when I was leaving the big law firm, beginning to leave to transition to become a full-time professor. And I got 32 job interviews one of which, Northeastern University's chair, told me it was the greatest interview he had ever heard in roughly 30 years on that faculty. So good interviews I had, but I did not identify with critical race theory, even though they had cited me. Kimberly Crenshaw, in her 2009 Connecticut Law Review, one of the founders of critical race theory, cited my student work that was published in the Thurgood Marshall Law Review. She's a great critical race theorist. I don't reject critical race theory as out of hand and out of order and bad. I just think it doesn't get us where I think we need to be, intellectually, politically, or otherwise. I'm a legal realist, which is a Louis Brandeis type approach to the law. So there's a place, though, in the academy for critical race theory, for Marxism, all of these things. I'm not a Marxist at all, but it's the only intellectual approach that could get us to the complete truth about the wretched economic circumstances in which chattel slavery put my people, the black race of America. No other framework worked with that. You may not be a feminist, but there's no doubt that without first wave feminist theory, we would still have women being forced to prove they were on birth control before they got a bank loan for rental property like women used to have to do in the 70s. Oh, y'all are shocked out here that women used to have to do that. That's because everybody gets all cute and modern and forget what people had to do. So no wonder they were burning their bras. Yes, it looks bad. So I made the comment, or the analysis for this caller, but back on the panel, that I'm glad that I went to college in the 90s, where conservative Republicans openly attacked affirmative action in education, openly wondered whether the black people at Emory University were largely underqualified relative to the white people, and we had to deal with that. Liberal white people who were for affirmative action, black, everybody. And I'm very good friends now with some of those white conservative Republicans. A lot of them have come somewhat over to my position on it, and I've moved kind of toward a moderate, openness to maybe try something else. But that's what you do in school. That's the purpose. I don't understand a billionaire snowflake beating down an 18-year-old. If I were a professor there, even though I'm very sympathetic to the Israeli position and have been for decades, I still believe I'm for affirmative action. But there ought to be a place for conservative people who are not, so that we can refine. If that hadn't been the case, then Sandra Day O'Connor would not have allowed affirmative action for another 20 years, which she did, in her opinion, in which she totally flipped her awful jurisprudence on race, which was absolutely terrible, all her life. But she did the right thing on affirmative action because we believe she had grappled with it honestly. So I'm not for shutting down the dialogue. And I think the young people need to be protected, even though I might not agree with them. I'm not an adherent to critical race theory, but there's a lot of good in that, and it belongs in the academy. In the academy, at least. We would not know that mass incarceration exists without the critical race theorists. What do you think? The originalists were going to get us there? Of course not. And there's a place for that too. Obviously, we need to stop doing all or nothing, especially in school. I'm tired of it. Caller, you're live on the Call to Justice WBGR. What is your query this day?
I'm watching your show outside of my patio. I hope you can hear me okay.
You're on your patio and you sound great. It feels like summer here in Prince George's County, Maryland, in the greater Washington region today. It got hot and humid. My air conditioning kicked on. So if you're on your patio and it's like it is here, wherever you are, God bless you. And I can hear you loud and clear, caller. Tell us what's on your mind.
I'm in Pennsylvania, by the way, but I got a lawyer on something, and a personal thing. I'm going to talk about it, but I got a lawyer, and it's like she don't do nothing. She don't explain nothing to me, and then she'll tell me she's going to do something I don't understand really, and I think she might even have I think something ethical is going on, but she keeps asking me for money, but I'm not getting no results, and, so I'm not sure maybe I should fire her, or what do you think?
Caller, that is unfortunate. What you heard is that this person has hired an attorney, has paid, is being asked for more money, and it's unclear whether and or to what extent the lawyer is performing what should be the scope of services the lawyer agreed to. And evidently it's so bad, the question is the lawyer committing something unethical? Which in the legal profession rises to the level of almost an actionable crime because the disciplinary authorities have prosecutorial powers over an attorney. Or should I fire, or should he fire the attorney? That's a tough one. I, again, am not giving legal advice. I'm talking in terms of legal theory. So let's talk about the law of lawyering. I taught legal ethics for 6 years in a law school that was housed the number one program for professionalism in America at one point. That's Campbell University, Norman Adrian Wiggins School of Law in North Carolina. And my students, nearly all of whom went on to become practicing lawyers, some of whom are judges and district attorneys now, were taught the sources of the law governing lawyers. At the center of the attorney obligation are duties to the client and to the system/public. And those sources of authority governing the conduct of attorneys include, first of all, contract law. If there's a written agreement or a writing that says what an attorney is going to do, or both, how is the attorney lining up with it? That is a contract. Any agreement, and I'm doing contract theory here, I taught contracts for 6 years too. Staple of first year law, it's on every bar exam. Contracts is about the relationships and deals people made and how you deal with how they might break down or keep from being broken down, or after they break down, how to get remedies and what are the appropriate remedies and ways to get them. So what you see is that the contract of the agreement, which might be informed by the conduct of the parties in the course of dealing, the realities of the case or matter for which you've retained that attorney. That contract should explain what that lawyer's supposed to do. One thing I don't like about hourly attorneys who charge by the hour to anything other than corporate clients is that hourly attorneys who work for middle-class folks and individual folk almost never will give you an estimate of how many hours. Up here, they're generally going to ask for between $300 and $1,000 an hour now, the average. That's probably the middle 50% of fees these days in the Washington area for just ordinary attorneys now. That's how much it is. If you go to an auto mechanic at $75 an hour, if you hire a computer installer at $50 an hour, they will give you a sense before you hire them of how much it's going to take to get your objectives. Why don't lawyers do that? Why doesn't the bar that regulates attorneys provide model uniform fee agreements that go to this, since they're going to drop a heavy hammer on a wayward attorney who's doing this to clients? I have so many people who come to my office whose lawyers have demonstrated that all they think that law license is for is to generate cash for the lawyer. They think their law license is an ATM. They don't give a flip about the discrimination you face. They don't give a flip about the fact that your work situation that you hired them for is changing by the hour. And they're at the golf course or on vacation. I had a lawyer who didn't tell me my case was dismissed until 27 days later, and I was a lawyer law professor. They were out of the country. And then didn't want to file a motion for reconsideration. I said, watch this. I wrote it myself. We filed it and won 3 months later. That lawyer was paid $15,000 cash. Can't see what went wrong in that. So I feel you. Such was I. The problem is, the minute you create a conflict with your attorney, either by going to what's called the Office of Disciplinary Counsel or Bar Counsel and filing a complaint, or you suggest to them they might be doing something unethical, the lawyer may release you because you may appear to be adverse. So the best thing you can do when you have a lawyer treating you that way is to find the most ethical, moral, smart, reliable, expert attorney you can who shouldn't be charging by the hour, and have that lawyer evaluate what's going on and advise you on how to deal with the lawyer you have. When other clients come to me who are already in an attorney-client relationship, with that, I often advise them, even when the lawyer's made a mistake, here's what you tell the lawyer to fix this, maybe, and to rehabilitate your matter. Because it does no good for you to not have a lawyer anymore, because the system's not going to make the lawyer pay you money. The system's just going to discipline your attorney. That doesn't help you much. You need your problem solved. Some lawyers don't understand why we get paid so much money. We get paid all that money because we're supposed to be able to solve problems, and there is a time component there. The faster, the better. What good does it do to have a problem that takes 6 years when you can find a smarter person to solve it in 6 days? Lawyers should be about eliminating problems. We have another call. So find an ethical attorney to evaluate what's going on in that case. And then, after you get that attorney, equip them with the information and ask, is my case going the right way? Is the lawyer doing what the lawyer's supposed to do under the fee agreement? And should I stay with this attorney? And if I have to get rid of them, what's the smoothest way? And can you do this? A lawyer has to be careful providing that kind of advice, but you are entitled to have a lawyer who's an expert in the law of lawyering. I had a case of a woman whose lawyer died. She jacked up his case and died in court. And the judge in the District of Columbia Federal Court did not do what the judge is supposed to do to protect that client when that lawyer dropped dead on her. And when I came in on appeal, the Court of Appeals wouldn't do what they were supposed to. We're going to have that woman on here to talk about all that dirt the system did when they wrote the rules on what happens when your lawyer jacks up your case and drops dead and did not follow them, even when I showed up to explain to the system its own rules. Maybe they did it to her because she's black. We're going to bring her on the call to justice. Caller! Thank you for being patient. You are live on WBGR, The Call to Justice. What is your matter?
Yeah, I'm concerned about the HBCU's situation. My question is, looking into the future of HBCUs, what do you think are some of their major challenges going forward?
That's a very good question. I thank you for that caller. That caller is concerned about the future of historically black colleges and universities. HBCUs are near and dear to my heart because they come from the post-slavery era of goodwill on the part of government, which organized for former slaves, public universities across the country, which at the time many of them were like high schools, like white colleges too. Higher ed is a relatively new phenomenon for most people. Even public high schools were not so common until the last half of the 1800s. You got an 8th grade education, good for you. So we've come a long way, white and black, in America and in the world. But for the places not elite, the non-Ivy League masses of universities, or the masses of people. So we've got these HBCUs that were marginalized and marginal from the beginning, the oldest of which date these days to 1865-ish. And there's been a perennial problem of funding and securing and keeping funding. Then we have the private ones, I believe 100% of which were founded by some Christian denomination. The Congregationalists, colleges including Lemoyne, Owen, and Fisk, and Atlanta University were the Congregationalist Church, the United Church of Christ. Often there were churches where these schools were founded. Second Congregational Church of Memphis, long associated with Lemoyne Owen College. I believe Barber, Scotia, in Concord, North Carolina is Presbyterian organ affiliated, and the First United Presbyterian Church there, I think, is one of those. Morehouse College, American Baptist. Spelman College, American Baptist. Friendship Baptist Church is where Spelman was organized, was founded and was started in Friendship Baptist Church of Atlanta. The AME Church, Morris Brown College, the first oldest college founded for blacks by blacks. Simmons College of Kentucky, 1879, founded by an entire Black Baptist convention. The General Association of Kentucky Baptists, Baptists in Kentucky, the Black Baptist Convention in the Commonwealth of Kentucky, founded Simmons College of Kentucky in 1879. So the churches have founded and funded these schools too. Howard University has a federal charter and has been the beneficiary of that. When Mordecai Johnson became the president of Howard in 1926, thereabouts, nothing was accredited. And when he left in 1960, everything was accredited. And there was a $1 million endowment, which was a big deal back then. And even now, some poor black schools would want that. We're seeing them close. St. Augustine's College was going to acquire St. Paul's College in the Black Belt near Emporia, Virginia, near South Hill, Virginia, known for producing great black school teachers, St. Paul's, but the books weren't good. And St. Augustine's down in Raleigh St. Aug's had to pull the plug. And those are two Episcopal schools affiliated with the Episcopal Church. My great-grandfather on my father's side, my father's father's father, went to Knoxville College after his father, a marble mason, helped build the early buildings in Knoxville. My father's father's father enrolled in Knoxville College, a Presbyterian school, and matriculated there, and went on to be chairman of the board of trustees at Simmons in Louisville, where he was a pastor of the Green Street Baptist Church for 38 years until he retired in 1950. He was born in 1873 in Knoxville, 1872, I think. But in any case, what now? Well, when the white schools decided they were going to open up to black people, largely in 1968 after the long hot summers, and when affirmative action got big, when desegregation happened before affirmative action with the state schools, people like Charlene Hunter Gault and Hamilton Holmes at Integrating University of Georgia, and James Meredith, who is yet with us, like Charlene and others, and James Meredith at Mississippi. The schools opened up to us just like the faculty of these white schools open to black faculty. So there was a dilution effect, and black schools started having a problem with market share. They had a monopoly on the black market of professors and students alike for 100 years. And all of a sudden they didn't. So they have struggled economically. But their missions are so special and unique. And now that we know about sociological phenomena and psychological phenomena such as stereotype threat, we know that like boys in boys prep schools and girls in girls prep schools, they have different modes of learning, and when there are other groups, sometimes that can interfere. So for black students, there's something called stereotype threat, where sometimes black students have a different experience from the white students in an integrated environment because there's a view that the whites all around, including the professors, have preconceived notions. And this is an expectation of many black people because of their lived experiences and because of everything that we learn in discrimination cases. This is not a figment of people's imagination. There is a reason to believe that you are going to face racial bias and you will be graded down due to your race, no matter what your performance was. And it's happened to me. I've been graded down because I was black, and I've done blind tests that proved it. So that is an issue. So our black schools remain viable and vital, but they remain on at a financial disadvantage. Now, one thing about President Trump is he had a policy, it was the policy of the Trump administration to greatly increase support to black schools and also to give them bigger appropriations from the federal view, from the federal sourcing, such that the presidents didn't have to come up and beg Washington every freaking year for that money, the way the previous administrations had done. So quiet as it's kept, President Trump was great for black colleges. That's also consistent with the philosophy of a lot of white conservatives that's called mismatch theory, where there's a belief that one of the reasons that at the upper echelon of historically white schools, in the upper echelons, black students, especially black men, tend to be in the bottom academically, even though they do fine and graduate and all that. There's a dynamic of a lower performing reality. And of course the idea is, well, of course, if you had on average lower grades and test scores, then it would make sense that you wind up on average, performing lower. That's a trade-off everybody has been comfortable with because it's good to have black people at that level, especially when you read the book The Shape of the River by former Harvard President Derek Bok and former Princeton President Bowen from the 90s, where there were longitudinal studies of about 20 highly selective white colleges, including Ivy League schools, that found that, yeah, blacks were let in with lower grades and scores, especially in first stage affirmative action from 68 on. And yeah, they may have had lower grades, but what they found is that blacks in particular, far more than any other group, give back to the larger community and their own community way, way, way more, including while in school, than any other group by far. That black people are far more committed to service. So you actually get more bang for your buck as a society because of the manner in which African Americans interact in society. I told you that when we were black student activists, we didn't give a flip if they took our jobs. Who wants them anyway if they're going to be that discriminatory and coercive? Let's act free. Slavery was supposed to have ended in 1863, 1865 after the Civil War. Let's be free. But what's beautiful is that frees you up not to be a careerist all the time, not to be a chaser of materialism all the time. Black people are known to be very religiously observant compared to other people. And that in the Protestant ethic, here on Believing in God Radio, we should know about, means that you're going to serve. You're going to give. American colleges are dealing with huge endowments because they come from a Protestant ethic of funding in the first place. Nearly all of the great white schools were affiliated with the church, and the denominations were loyal to those schools. My college, Emory, was Methodist. My law school, Harvard, was a Congregationalist seminary when it started in 1636. Emory, 1836. The Methodists at Emory, the Congregationalists at Harvard, not so much now. Columbia was a little bit Presbyterianish, Episcopalianish, but not as sectarian as others. Princeton was dyed-in-the-wool Presbyterian. And so the fact is, we have an ethic. So when you put the historically black religious colleges in perspective, like Morehouse, there's no greater contributor of black clergy, for example, than Morehouse College. And my father's father went to Morehouse College, matriculated there in 1924, and graduated from eventually Simmons College of Kentucky, which at the time was probably better than Morehouse, frankly, another Baptist school. So we've got to make sure that we support those schools. And it starts with understanding why they are justified even today. And the caller, I'm going to put you on a pause for a moment. Caller, hold there while I finish up the answer to what about the future of black schools? Historically black colleges and universities, of which there are about 100. I want to say something about appreciating those who have been the biggest supporters of those schools. Does anybody remember A Different World? The number 2 show in America at the time during prime time after the Cosby Show. It was number 2. And that was when a quarter of American TV households would tune into that same show every Thursday at 8:30 Eastern. Cosby Show number 1, that followed by A Different World. Bill Cosby saved the sitcom with The Cosby Show as a genre. And then with A Different World and fictitious Hillman College, he revitalized waning black interest in historically black colleges and universities. And if it weren't for the work of Dr. Bill Cosby in raising awareness of those schools by fictitious Hillman College with Whitley Gilbert and Dwayne Wayne and Ron Johnson and Jaleesa and Freddie Brooks, remember them in Height Hall after Dorothy Height Hall? And they would show buildings from Spelman. That was the fictitious, where they would show the school depictions of the fictitious Hillman College. Well, pop culture can help. And on the Cosby Show, remember Bill Cosby as Dr. Huxtable would wear black college t-shirts and jerseys. And it wasn't just Howard and Hampton and Florida A&M, the big ones, or North Carolina A&T. It was Stillman and Tougaloo and Lane, the CME school in my mother's hometown of Jackson, Tennessee, Lane College, where Mother Liberty CME Church has long been associated with that school and that black denomination, the Christian Methodist Episcopal Church, founded in the 1870s, that denomination and all of that. So we have to be aware and committed, as we are to the black church and to black political movements. we must have control of our own minds. And I must close it, as the caller holds, by noting that I got my start teaching at a historically black law school, of which there are 6. North Carolina Central University School of Law in Durham gave me my start. And the Baptist school, the white Baptist school across town, also they provided my first tenure track job after that year. So your identity and heritage and the extent to which you understand the significance of those things, just like for white folk, for German folk, for Australian folk, for Ghanaian folk, that will help you to recommit, to fund, and to replenish those treasures, those colleges, as I sit here in my academic regalia. Caller, the speaker is up. You are live on WBGR, The Call to Justice. What's on your mind?
Hi. I really appreciate this show, Professor. And my family and friends will watch together. So thank you so much. I want to know from your law practice vantage point what the emerging issues are facing our people coming into 2024.
Thank you for the question and for the encouragement, caller. We'll never get, I don't think, a viral, quote, following on this show. And that's not really the objective. Now, if I were not an evangelical, I want a large audience to share the information and exchange and to avail all of this to as many people as possible, because God knows people need it. But I also know that itching ears don't really want a lot of what we're offering here on Believing in God Radio. So that's all right. Give me a remnant, that's fine. We'll never be viral, maybe. But for those who tune in, you're going to get a lot out of this. And hopefully your life will be improved every week. And my life too, from hearing from you and getting new perspectives. One reason we teach, they make professors teach. You can revisit long-held assumptions. These little fresh minds often come up with interesting ways of looking at things that might even be profound. And so you're constantly thinking about everything in new ways, from new perspectives and in new times. The question is, of course, what are the emerging issues? We'll get to that. But again, I want to stay on the first part of the question, the setup to it, about people watching this program together. I am not a clout chaser. You won't find me tagging the big influencers and folk or engaging in the latest fad. I'm reminded of something that one of my 60 first cousins, I have 60 first cousins when you count both sides of my family around the world. And one of the things that my first cousin, William Augustus Jones III, and now there are 5, there's the 5th, a little baby boy, wonderful baby boy, William Augustus Jones V. And they're blessed because it was all the oldest boys in that entire line. William Augustus Jones Jr. was the firstborn and a boy, and then William Augustus Jones III was the firstborn of 4. Jr. was the first of 7 of 8 really. One died in infancy, 1934. Then comes along William Augustus Jones III, who was the firstborn of 4. And then William Augustus Jones IV, who was the firstborn. And then William Augustus Jones V, who's the firstborn. So you got firstborn boys. W.A. Jones III told me once that somebody asked his father, who was a pastor of then was a huge church in the 70s, 5,000 members, a full-time staff of 27. And he was one of the greatest preachers to walk the earth in the last century, William Augustus Jones Jr., and had a great church to boot. And it was a great church before he got there. As I've always said, behind every great pastor, there's a great congregation, or 2 or 3. It's pastor and people. And when you have them both together, he would talk about the dialogical, the call and response. It's not just the preaching, but it's the laboring in the vineyard and the building out of a church. And William Augustus Jones III said that somebody had asked his father once somewhere, Bill, my goodness, what a great church. How many members do you have now? To which Uncle Bill, William Augustus Jones Jr. remarked, he had a very deep, booming voice, very large, commanding presence. He said, I don't count my members. I weigh them. And that's how I view my clientele and how I view my viewership. It's not the number of followers or views here we have. It's the content of this program this broadcast. It's the seriousness and the weight of you, the viewers, who tune in here to WBGR week after week, or who catch us on our YouTube channel, the calltojustice.tv website, on Twitter, on X. Those of you who tell a friend, and where you all are positioned, many of you in very high places. So we don't need 1 million people here, though that would be great. I'm glad that people like you, caller, are listening and asking, what are the emerging issues, Amos Jones? Thank you for that encouragement, that you're watching with your friends and family, because I think we have something going very valuable here because of our viewership and because of what I'm trying to prepare for you, and we do prepare and give. And I'll answer the second part in a moment, but I just want to stay with this, what we're doing. I remarked after surveying what's happening with social media and these so-called influencers, they'll call you an influencer because you have 100,000 people. But I really do wonder if you really have any influence. Are people just ogling you on Instagram because you look cute? Or because you're funny, or you have a soundbite? When you tell them to do something and mobilize them, will they do it? And how many of them will do it? Maybe you're an influencer, maybe you're not. But having a large following count or viewer count may not mean what people think all the time. And it occurred to me, thank God there was no Instagram in 1955 in the Montgomery bus boycott, or 1963 in the March on Washington, because I'm convinced if there had been an Instagram or YouTube, my African American people, God bless their hearts, might have been following, instead of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., we might have been following Little Richard, or somebody like that, or James Brown. Great entertainers and stuff, but not what we needed to get that EEOC and that Civil Rights Act of 1964 going. That's the only reason that we have equal employment opportunity in this country. The enforcement powers of that federal statute and that right to sue your employer in court under those principles of anti-discrimination. We might have been following Little Richard because it was more influence, more followers. Thank God that we were forced to tune in a different way, and we were in church more. So what are the emerging issues, as the other caller waits patiently? The emerging issues include fraud, waste, and abuse. We're looking at the D.C. Attorney-Client Arbitration Board, and we're asking why it is that so many lawyers are not getting their money's worth out of the D.C. Bar's promises at what's supposed to be a fast, quick arbitration service. Why are arbitrators incompetent in breaking the ethics rules I've discussed? We're about to expose all of that. As people call me, have you been an attorney in D.C., one of the 100,000, and you too have been victimized by an attorney-client arbitration board that breaks all its rules, that takes forever, that does not live up to what it promises on paper? If that's the case, call me, reach us at the Call to Justice, and we're going to talk about it. We're going to expose the attorney-client arbitration board and what they're not doing. We're getting into that. That's an emerging issue that has implications for all of the public in this region. Another emerging issue, we're looking at these fraudulent home warranties. You're paying $100 a month for a home warranty, and they're acting like all the other insurance companies, denying coverage. I've looked at American Home Shield on the Better Business Bureau, and we're going after them because people are speaking up about that fraud, waste, and abuse in the private sector, lying and taking hundreds of dollars a month. We allege. So that's an emerging issue. And just general consumer protection, civil rights, social justice, justice, righteousness. Those are some of the ones. Stay tuned and subscribe. Follow us on Instagram. All these links are in the icons at the bottom of the calltojustice.tv. X, formerly known as Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Snapchat. Follow us there because we're going to be having shorts during the week where we let you know who's under investigation next and what we're exposing and these crooked ways that we're straightening out, and we're doing it, and we're going to prove it and report back to you, the viewers. So I thank you for asking what's next, what's up. Now, caller, thank you for your patience. You're live on WBGR, Believing in God Radio, the Call to Justice.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to say I have a question about something, but I like the way that your show's situated, at the intersection of like law, religion, public policy, politics, and this question kind of relates to all that. It made me think about it. Could you share if you have any thoughts on the new House Speaker? They finally have one after, it looks like a few weeks, and any thoughts on that, and if you heard his speech that he gave, and what do you think it might mean for the different kind of issues you deal with, if anything?
That's a very good question. Thank you, caller. We have a new House Speaker after all the weeks of failed votes on almost household names if you're a political junkie like me, after Kevin McCarthy was ousted after considerably conservative, a block of 8 said no more. It's funny, by the way. I don't understand why 8 conservatives in their caucus understand the power they have, but 8 black people in the Democratic caucus can't make more happen. I don't understand how a Tea Party can invent itself in a few months and have a total caucus with 40 people 15 years ago almost, and set the agenda like a swing block vote should be able to do in a system like ours. And our black caucus doesn't do that. I'm inspired by the ability to articulate in politics the way these groups who believe they can't take it anymore are able to do. And I would encourage those of us who are marginalized, politically homeless, or otherwise disrespected, and our constituents aren't getting what they are entitled to as Americans, to maybe wake up and take some notes and maybe do that themselves. But about Mike Johnson, my observation is that this is an upright, moral person. He was an attorney for the Alliance Defending Freedom, which is a evangelical Protestant legal advocacy group that has been on the vanguard of protecting religious freedom. And for those of you who don't think religious freedom and religious liberty are in peril in our country, you just don't know what's going on. We'll do a whole show on that. Or just go to www.stopcpssexchanges.org, www.stopcpssexchanges.org, and look at Washington Children's National Medical Center and what they've been doing. You're going to hear about that in a big way because we're suing them now. 2 suits. Black people, black Baptists, beat down, we allege, in these government filings. We already have them in human rights charges. And what they were doing, trying to make black Protestants change their religion in order to get a child back. And the system took the child permanently. Evil. So I'm glad that there's a Speaker of the House. Look, I'm not a Republican, I'm an independent. But if we're going to have a Speaker of the House who's essentially carrying the same votes as McCarthy would, I'm glad that now we don't have a California Yahoo, that we have a Baptist layman, lawyer, who at least will protect black Protestants who are being abused. That's a good thing. It's funny. I've never seen so much, and here's a term, you heard it here first. Watch out for my law review article coming out on this one. Here's an exclusive. Reverse religious discrimination. This man is being, you're going to see more of this, he's being attacked for adhering to a traditional conservative Protestant biblical worldview. That is what the biggest attacks on him boil down. They hate his belief in the nuclear family. They hate his being on the board of one of the agencies of the Southern Baptist Convention, the largest Protestant group in America, denomination. And what's odd is I've seen very pro-Israel people who are liberal going out of their way to attack Mike Johnson, the new speaker. If your number one concern right now is Israel and the war on Hamas, and you hate Republicans anyway, you hated McCarthy, you ought to be glad that there's a Republican who is the most solid on Israel because he bases it on the Word of God and his convictions that are a matter of life or death, eternal life. So I would think that if your number one priority is Israel right now and its security and viability, and its war on Hamas being successful, and Congress controls the purse strings, you're supposed to be glad that Republicans, who you don't like anyway, now have a man up there who, for him, protecting Israel is a matter of faith. I'm not saying that should be your view, viewer to WBGR Black Folk Christians. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying if that is your priority, you ought to give thanks. And if you don't, liberal, Israel first person, then maybe you are engaging in reverse religious discrimination against Baptists, Southern Baptists. And I would tell you to look at your heart by your own standards you claim to believe in. And that goes for everybody. This is the same standards to which I hold my African American people when they act. You want to bow down and worship Barack Obama in your church, which you were doing, but you get mad when conservative Christians at First Baptist Dallas are happy and sing their anthem, Make America Great Again, at the Kennedy Center, which First Baptist Dallas did, because a lot of them are for Donald Trump. And their pastor, Dr. Robert Jetris, is solid for Trump. Well, don't you be bowing down to Obama, church and state, and your Baptist church black, and mad that they're bowing down to Trump now. It's the same problem. And so we don't have a hymn of invitation because the technology is not working. But what I will do is a charge. This is a charge. My former church, First Baptist DC, Dr. James Green Somerville, used to conclude with a charge and a benediction. And Dr. Somerville is somebody's preacher. He's at First Baptist Richmond now. But Dr. James Green Somerville, an outstanding preacher of the highest order, would give a charge to that powerful congregation. Talk about don't count them, weigh them at that time. Some heavyweights in there. And he would tell you, go into the world and you articulate this word and these convictions in the way of the Lord. And that's my charge to you. We thank you for tuning in, and we will see you again soon. I have next week off to celebrate my sister's 60th birthday out of town. Look for a rerun next week. Thank you for tuning in, and I will see you next month for episode 5 after the rerun week on November the 3rd next week. Thank you so much. Have a blessed week. Good day.